Warning! Tube amplifiers have lethal voltages inside them. Please do not attempt to build, test, or repair these without understanding and following all safety protocols. Hey y'all! This is the final video, and we're going to be hooking up the volume control and the final LED on the cathode of the driver tube. So, let's jump right into this. I want to try to zip this along and not drag this out. First thing we need to do is to make sure which end is ground and which end the signal goes to from the RCA jack, so we make sure we don't wire it up backwards. We definitely want low volume to the left, high volume to the right. So what we want to do is put our ohm meter on resistance, clip on to the center, and then clip onto one end. Okay, we're all the way at the left, and that is low ohms. As we turn it up, goes up to almost 100K. So what that means is if we have the grid of the driver tube connected to the center pin, and this is ground, when we turn it to the left, we're going to be shorting out the grid to ground, which will mean no signal. And we can go ahead and jump her over to this other side. We can see there, if we hook our signal from the RCA up to this pin on this side, then when it's all the way to the left, there's a lot of resistance between here and this, which is the grid. But as we go to the right, it goes almost to a direct connection, which would be max volume. So what that's telling us is this pin is our ground. This pin goes to the grid, and this pin goes to the signal of the RCA jacks. So I've already started working on this, and this is going to be a little challenging to videotape because this stuff is really small, and it's hard to see without a magnifying glass some of this stuff. So if you don't have great close-up vision, you probably do want to have a magnifying glass handy to make sure that you can see what you're doing and you don't miss anything. So what we're doing here is, this is a 2-wire connector with a shield. On this end, we're tying the shield to the ground, and then here's our signal wire. On this end, the shield is not connected. The negative's hooked up to this pin. The grid is hooked up to this pin. And then this wire is going over to our RCA jack. The shield and the ground are connected to this pin. The signal is on this pin. And then at the other end, the shield will be not connected to anything, and the negative and the ground will be hooked to the RCA jack. And I'll show you how I'm doing that. Here's a circuit diagram of connecting the signal with a shield like I'm doing. It's a little different than some people do. Some people just use the shield with a single conductor to go over to the RCA jacks. And while that works, the shield is still acting as the ground path and can pick up noise. By having the shield of the shielded wire only connected at one end, it totally acts as a shield, and that means both the positive and the ground wires are shielded from picking up any noise. And let me zoom in here and show you what this looks like. And then let me see if I can turn this up and show you what it looks like on the front side. Like that. And then as we come around, it looks like that. So let's jump in to wiring this thing up. So here's the shielded cable we're going to be using, and like I said, it's a shielded with 2 conductor cable. I believe these are 24 gauge wire. So we want to recreate what we did on this end for the second wire that's going to be going from the amplifier to the volume control. So we want to go ahead and cut off a little piece of this. It makes it easier to work with. Then we want to come in here and we want to strip off about this much of the insulation. I get my strip tool, kind of work around like this, lightly pulling down on it, because we don't want to cut through the shield. And you'll feel it when it starts to move, and we go just like that. And you may lose 1 or 2 little small strands, but as long as you get most of it, you're fine. Okay, the other thing that we want to do here is, you can see there's this shielding stuff. And like I said, this is going to be really hard to videotape and not get in the way of the camera, but you want to come in here and pull the shielding stuff all back, away from the conductors. And make sure you get all of them. There's always 1 or 2 little stray ones that try to not get pulled over to the side. And all it takes is one of these little stray wires to be going from positive to negative, and you will have no signal. And that channel will be dead. So you want to make sure you don't do that. So we want to pull all these over to the side so it looks like that. And then we want to pull all of them over to the same side as the white wire, because we're going to be connecting the shield to this white wire on this end. Then we twist these up, pull it alongside the white wire so it looks like that. The next thing we want to do is we want to strip off a little bit of this white insulation. About like that much. Then you want to twist the ends of them together just like that. And we're going to come in here and solder this part together. Then put some heat shrink tubing over this and shrink it down. Then we'll have our negative connected to the shield and the positive. And I'm going to go ahead and strip this positive back and tin it too. And this is one of those times when you want to make sure your soldering iron has a nice clean tip. Because this is some really small wire we're dealing with here. So there's that. There's that. And I don't know if you noticed, when I was soldering this wire, some of the insulation shrunk up. So be prepared for that and compensate that for how much you strip off of these wires, that the insulation is going to shrink back once you put some heat on it. So the next step is getting a little piece of heat shrink tubing and sliding it down over that. And then coming in and shrinking the tubing down to insulate that shield from accidentally ended up touching something. And what you end up with looks like that. Now we're going to be doing this on the end of the wire that's going from the volume control to the RCA jack as well. Exact same thing. Not going to show you doing this twice, but we're going to be doing this at this end that's going to the tag strip on the amplifier, and then we're also going to do this same process on the end of the wire that's going to this side of the volume control. on the end of this wire that hooks up to the volume control, we are not going to be connecting the shield. So we're going to strip back the insulation and then cut the shield wires off so that they're not connected to anything. Okay, but before you do this, what you want to do is put the volume control in the amp and figure out the length that you want this wire to be that's going to be going from the volume control to the tag strip. So I'm going to pause right here a second, cut this to the right length for my amp, and then come back and show you prepping the end of this and soldering it onto the volume control. Okay, so taking into account that we're going to have the red wire coming out past where the ground is, we've cut it to this length right here, and now we're going to strip back about that much of this wire. And again, I just gently use the biggest. I actually wish my cutter had a little bit bigger wire gauge, but it doesn't. So just be real gentle. Work your way around. You could use something like a dull X-Acto knife would work too. You just want to be careful. On this end, it isn't as important because if we strip off, we're going to be cutting all of this shielding off anyway. But on the other ends, you do want to make sure that you just cut the insulation and that you don't cut the shield wires. Okay, so like I said, on this end, we are not connecting the ground. And so, pull all these back. You need to get a magnifying glass and make sure there's no little stray strands like hanging out in the middle. And then we're going to come in and cut all these off as close to the outer insulation as we can. This is where these flush cutting nippers are really shine. We want it to look like that. So we know we want to cut this one off a little shorter, so we come in here and snip that off so they're about like that. Because the ground's going to go to this terminal and the grid or the signal's going to go to this one. So next we want to strip some insulation, and remember that the heat is going to shrink back some of the insulation. So be careful, especially on this ground one, that you don't strip it back too far where the insulation shrinks way back up into there. And I'm going to go ahead and tin both of these leads. Again, make sure you have a nice clean iron. The other thing too, tinning them kind of pre-shrinks the insulation so we know where it's going to be. So when we're at this point, you want it to look something like that. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our little jeweler pliers and we're going to come in here and twist a little bit of an end on it. Doesn't have to be a whole lot. And then at this point, we want the wires to look kind of like that. One thing to remember too is this first one is going underneath the top one. Like if you look at how I did this other one, see how this second wire goes over the top of this one? So we want to make sure that we solder this down low on both these pins. And we've tinned these leads too. So what I do is I get a little bit of solder on the end of the iron and hold the wire up down low and come in and solder it to the terminal. Then now we can kind of bend that one around Come in and do the same thing on it. And then we have those two wires connected. Now the next thing I want to do is, you can see on this one that I put a little glue, a little contact cement under it. We're going to do the same thing on this one after we solder this other wire on. So I'm going to prep the other end of this wire, and I just want to show you before I do that, on this end you're going to want a longer piece of insulation stripped off, because we got to have the ground go from here and the signal go to there. So we want to pull off a longer piece of this, and then again pull the shielding wires out from around the two conductors. And by the way, I think they call this microphone cable. Just if you're looking for this stuff. And they have it with solid wire and stranded wire. Either one will work. You don't want the really fat microphone cable, so make sure you don't get that. So we know we want to come in something like this. We want to trim this off just a tiny bit. Like that. And then we're going to trim the shield off to the same length. We're going to strip this white wire back like this. And because this is going to be a little, we're going to curve it where the shield sits on the outside, like that. So we're going to trim that off and then twist the end of that together. It's going to look like that. Then we're going to come in and go ahead and solder those two together. Again, this is the ground going up to the RCA jack. So the shield is going to be connected to the ground on this end, but not on the other end. So now we want to get a little piece of heat shrink tubing. And this is one of the more important parts to be insulating, because we've got quite a bit of the shield sticking out. And about like that. We're going to shrink this up. Honestly, this is the hardest part, doing the connections at the volume control. The other end's relatively simple. We need to bend a little hook in the end of this one too. It just helps kind of stabilize it while you're trying to solder it, and gets a little more surface area actually touching the little pin. I mean, I'm pretty sure these little volume controls were designed to be used with a printed circuit board, but we are point-to-point wiring them, which makes things a little more interesting. But not impossible. Hopefully y'all can see what I'm doing here. This is, like I said, this is the closest I've ever had a camera trying to work with stuff, and it's real easy. Like, just you move it a couple of inches and it's off camera, so you'll have to excuse me if that happens a little bit. There's that. Then we want to bend this around just like we did on the first one. So we have a little bit of a hook going around the pin. Like that. Then we're going to hold that there. come in with the solder and solder that together. And then when we get all done, we'll come in at the end with the ohm meter at the other end of the leads and make sure that nothing is shorted out and that everything's connected like it's supposed to be. These wires have almost no current going through them. It's just the signal voltage. And so we don't have to worry about the size of the wires or anything like that. But as you can see now, we have, these are both grounds. These are going to the grids. We have the shield connected to this ground on both sides. And then here is the positive signal that's coming over from the RCA jacks. Like I said, guys, this is the hardest part. Once you get this done, the rest of it's pretty easy. So it looks like this video is going to make a liar out of me. I thought I could edit this down into a single video, but there was just too much detail that I didn't want to cut out. So we got one more video coming. Trust me, guys, we're getting down to the end here. The last bit of this is really easy compared to wiring up this volume control. So I hope you're enjoying this series. If you are, please sub to the channel. Please like the video. And we'll see you soon for more 6SQ7 fun. Have a great day.